Everyone, let's wrap up March. March was strange. Strange is a good word. I tried to write my letter to March and I couldn't because I was mostly confused. Things were overwhelming and good, but I didn't feel good. So I don't really know. There are 3 vlogs up where I talk about some of the books that I read, but I read more books than I talked about in the vlogs. But let's just jump into the books that I've read. It's been all over the place this month and I enjoyed myself. So let's start with physical books. I read Welcome to Hyunam-Dong Bookstore and I really enjoyed this book. It's a very easy read. You can really get lost in the book. The book follows a bookstore owner who opens the book. We learn about her past and we learn about her struggles in opening a bookstore, the thoughts that go into maintaining and running a bookshop, all of that. We learn some of her life, some of her professional life, and some of the life in the bookshop. But that's not all. We also have other characters that we learn more about. There is mainly her barista. There's a coffee shop or coffee corner in the bookshop. And for that, the owner hires a barista, so we get a little bit about his past, we get a lot about coffee and coffee production and his journey with coffee, and also a lot around his life. And the effect the barista and the coffee shop have on the bookstore is also discussed. Aside from that, we have some of the regulars in the bookshop and other side characters that we learn more and more about as we read along. This book not only deals with the bookstore and the coffee production and the coffee shop, but it also deals with finding yourself, doing what you like, going against the mainstream and society's expectations. We can see that in the characters that they pursued a career and something that is put upon them and the expectations that family, society and everyone has, and they kind of don't want to follow that, and how they break free and the repercussions and effects that had. I really enjoyed this. I talk a lot more about this in the vlogs. Poor Things I mainly picked up because I'm doing this Read Good Books challenge by, what's his channel name? Ben something. I'll leave a link to the video. And for March, the prompt was an Oscar adaptation. And I'm not really interested in watching the film, even less after reading the book, but I really enjoyed the book. The book looks like something I might enjoy already. The cover is a little bit weird. Then we have the story of a book that was found in somewhere on the side of the road, and it was written by some kind of weirdo doctor in the turn of the century. Sort of that. I'm a little bit vague on the details right now. But there is an introduction to how the book came to be, then there is the main part of the book, and then there is more information afterwards of characters or people that were part of the book that they found. Sort of that. So the whole thing is represented as a true or a story, a non-fiction story, an experience of this doctor and how he came to meet his wife and the characters involved. So the book doesn't only focus on the story of this wife and the character that is mainly involved in the book, but also more about the finding of the book, the stories around it and the reality of it. It's trying to tell us that this is a true story and this is all real. And the book itself that is referred to in the telling, which is the main part of this book, is the story of one strange man putting together a woman from nothing. Well, not from nothing, but someone died and he transplanted a different brain, a baby's brain, into the grown woman's body, and then how they teach her and how she grows up and her experiences of life and things like that. It's not focusing on childhood, but we mostly see her grow through the early development changes and become a full-fledged adult also in her mind, and it's very interesting. I highly enjoyed the whole aspect of the story, how it came to be and what it wants to do, and that as a reader you question everything. You don't really know who to trust, neither the author, neither the stories of how the book came to be, nor the narration in the book that they found, because afterwards the letter by the woman, who apparently was made out of parts, tells them like no. And so you really have to question everything. But but it's really, really interesting and I highly recommend it. The last physical book I finished was Winter Love, and this was, I have no idea how that got into my life. I received an email that a package arrived and I'm like, okay. And I think it's true. This book had to be in my life. It's a very short read. It's been written in the 60s and it talks about the, let's say, the last few months in World War II in London, where two women have an affair. And these two women meet at a college where they're at and they start an affair and falling in love with each other, but they struggle with everything. It's about a year of their life, and the narrator recalls the story later on. We know that she has moved on in life. We know that she's in a different situation. We also know that the relationship didn't work out, and it's pretty clear early on. But I really liked to read about the time, about the characters, the struggles they had, also with coming to themselves and how to deal with loving a woman, because there were no guidelines and they didn't know what to do and they were confused, and one of them was married, which was also a problem. So I really enjoyed this read. It was well written, it was a beautiful cover and fast-paced. I couldn't put it down. Another classic I read in March was The Enchanted April. I'm just realizing I should have read that in April. Anyways, this is a book of also women in England. I forgot about the time when it was set. I think after the First World War, 1920s maybe? I don't remember. Anyways, it's not in the present day, but it's definitely in the past. And we have these women who are also worn out by their daily life and daily responsibilities of being wives and being in society and following everybody else's rules and not being able to just be themselves completely and give into their wants. And then they see, or rather one sees, an advertisement for a villa in Italy and is immediately intrigued, but it's too expensive for one person. And then she sees someone else seeing the advert and being intrigued as well. So they start up chatting, form up a plan how to go for the whole of April to Italy and escape their lives for a while and get a break and just some rest. Because they can't afford it alone, they take on two other women as well. One young one who's exhausted by men always following her around and falling in love. She's rather high status, I think. Duchess? I don't think she's a duchess. Anyways, high society definitely. And the other one is rather old. All her friends have died and she wants to just remember them and is also kind of lonely and doesn't really feel fitting in society anymore and doesn't have a place really. So those four women go to the villa and then events happen. The beginning is very slow and very detailed, and I really enjoyed reading this, being in the women's minds. And as soon as we get to the villa, we change the people we focus on a little bit, and there is some different behaviors that kind of annoyed me a little bit, but also really made the whole thing more enjoyable. That makes sense. There's more drama going on and more background stories. And I really enjoyed how the effects in this villa, or being in the villa, being away from their normal everyday life, changed all four women and the events that ensue. I really enjoyed this. It was longer than I expected, but I also talk about this book in, I think, the first vlog I did. The last ebook I finished was a complete cover buy, unexpected, and it was more of a roller coaster read. I was drawn in by the cover of The Emperor and the Endless Palace, and then I started reading and I got confused and then I got sidetracked, but I was already hooked. So The Emperor and the Endless Palace is a debut novel. It just came out. It's very fresh and new, and it's a story told in 3 timelines. We follow 3 couples in different times, one in 4 BCE, one in 1740, and one in the present day. And all of these couples are the same souls. So it's a reincarnation, one eternal relationships kind of story. And I enjoyed the stories themselves. I enjoyed how they were connected. It doesn't have a happy end, which I didn't enjoy, but that's just me. The ending is fitting and suitable, but I love happy endings. It's all centered around Asian characters and Asian society. The story in 4 BCE plays at the Endless Palace, where there's a relationship between the king or the emperor and one of his officials, and how the relationship got together, and some intrigue at the court and all of that. In 1740, we follow an innkeeper and a fox spirit who are engaged with each other, have a relationship, and also the events around their relationship getting together and what happens there. In the present day, we're in Los Angeles following this newly come out young Asian man who finds himself intrigued and drawn into a scene where he didn't expect to be, and falling for a artist who also turns out to be their eternal relationship. And I really enjoyed that. The story is told in alternating chapters, alternating through the different stories, and it really keeps you glued to the pages. I was really drawn in by the events that are happening. I was drawn in by the characters. I really enjoyed everything that was happening. There were some things where I could have done less with, mostly the sex talk, but there were some things that I felt a little bit rushed at the end, but overall I really enjoyed this book. I talk more about this in the Easter vlog, and also the events around me getting sidetracked, but I highly recommend this. I think this is a story that has potential to be read by many people. Like I said, it just came out in March, so I feel good being on the hype before the hype exists. I hope there will be hype. Okay, that leads us to audiobooks. I listened to more of the Wayward Children books, the books 6 to 9. So I finished the Wayward Children series now, and like I mentioned last month in my wrap up, that I really enjoyed the books. I wasn't expecting to like them as much. As the story progressed, I'm not sure if I got a little bit worn out by the same kind of storytelling, by the same kind of story, being in a story for this long in such a short compacted time. I think I listened to all those books in the matter of 2 months. So that's 9 books, the whole series. That can affect how you take the series in. As true to form, the odd books were at the school or started off at the school, and the even books were more concentrated in a different world, in characters, how they escaped or were stumbled into another world, and how life was there for them, either new characters or characters we've met before at the school. The school chapters connect all the other chapters and characters, so I really enjoyed that. I think it is a much better series than I expected, and could recommend it. If you ever thought this was not for you, give it a try. Everyone's right. It's really solid, good books. They're fast-paced. On audio, they're so easy to fly through. I enjoyed them, and they were all well done. Then I listened to Girl, Woman, Other, and I don't know. I was always weary of it. I've seen it before. It's won a lot of awards and got a lot of praise, and I always thought, this is not for me. And I'm perfectly fine accepting that books are not for me, and I was right. I also misunderstood the premise of this book. I thought it was also alternating chapters between different characters from different generations, but it was not. It was 12 chapters focusing on 12 different women. They are all connected in some way, and they feel, for me as an outsider, like a representation of different lives or storylines past Black women in England could go down and could find themselves on in different times, in different ages. They're all of different ages, so they're not just, we're not looking at one generation, we're looking at different generation, we're looking at different classes maybe even. I'm not really sure if it's really the different class system, but different opportunities, different situations in life, different paths. And I must say, in hindsight, I enjoyed the book much more than while listening to it. The book was well narrated. That wasn't the problem. I think when you read the book, there is some playing with the normal writing style, but as I listen to it, I cannot comment on that. I just noticed that all of the characters, some I was more interested in, some chapters I was just like, this is boring, and some really felt so stereotypical that it felt like checking off boxes. So that was a downside side for me that I didn't enjoy it as much. But like I said, I don't really know. Maybe this is just not a book for me, and other people can identify with the characters and the stories and the experiences much more than I ever could. The last audiobook I finished was The Mass House, and that was a blast. It was a fast-paced audiobook, science fiction. It starts off here on Earth, sometime in the future when flooding has gone worse. London is halfway underwater, and we're starting off at a ballet, and our main character is the principal of the ballet theater and also a ballet dancer, and we keep following him. And shortly after the beginning, London is completely flooded and he becomes a refugee, and we meet him months later on Mars. Mars has been colonized for several generations, mostly run by China, and it's also their own, how do you say that, municipality? I really don't know what exactly that is. I must admit, the world building in the beginning with the political setup, I didn't get everything there. The world building isn't only in the beginning, so it has trickle drip information and it adds onto the world throughout the book, which I really enjoyed. But the main setup of how Mars got together, I completely don't remember that. I wasn't focusing on that. It might have been in there in more detail, but I couldn't tell you. Overall, I really enjoyed the idea of this Mars colony where there are people they call Earth-strong people, that are the people who are coming from Earth, and then there are the natural Mars people or the naturalized people, that are people that have adapted or are multiple generations living on Mars already, and so they have these two different people who are a danger to each other, because Earth-strong people have a different, I think it's bone density because of the gravity, but they are stronger, and the naturalized people can easily be killed by accident if the Earth-strong people aren't careful. So the Earth-strong people have to wear cages when they're around normal people, and they are banned from a lot of places because there are a lot of, let's say, homicides they call it, but it's not really homicides, I guess, if it's done by accident. But there is an address of the power struggles there and the difference how people are treated. That's in the book. The main storyline follows our ballet dancer who really gets himself caught up in a political twist and finds himself in a situation where he has to naturalize because he doesn't have any other options. Naturalization for Earth people means that they get a lot of health risks. It's risky to transform your body into a Mars adaptable body, but then you become a citizen, you get other rights, you have a different chance of jobs and everything that comes with being a naturalized person, because you're not a danger to society anymore. Sort of like that. So the plot revolves around the politician who wants every Earth-strong person to naturalize, and because there were some struggles and political drama, the ballet dancer ends up marrying this politician, and then the story really takes off with them being put together, really enemies to lovers, as they're both afraid of each other, they're both not very trusting, and you see how that evolves. And I really enjoyed that storyline. I really enjoyed seeing how these two characters came together, overcome their differences, and also how they managed to really be drawn to each other from the beginning but still weary of each other, and how that all comes out in the end with a lot of political drama on the background and a lot of more that is happening. But this book really had me listening to it on end. I really couldn't put it down. It's also, I think it came out in March, so really enjoyed that. Very happy that I picked it up, and it was a good end for March on a nice audiobook. But that's not all that I started. So in March, I decided to DNF quite a few books. One of which, or the first I DNF'd, was Greek lessons. I started reading this. This is very short. It should be easy to get through even if I'm not enjoying it. But I wasn't enjoying it. I've read 2 other books by the author, and I really liked both of those. But with this one, I just couldn't get into the story. I was always confused what we're doing. What do we want to do? Where are we going? And most of all, who is talking? I couldn't put it together. And so at some point I decided, no, this is not enjoyable, this is not fair to the book, so I'm going to DNF it. I couldn't even tell you what it's about. That's the worst part of it. I think I read 50 of 150 pages. Another book I DNF'd was a classic I'd been meaning to read for ages, A Passage to India. And I started it on my Kindle because it was very cheap and I was sleeping bad again, and so I wanted to read an ebook at night, and I thought this would be easy. I've read something by the author before which I didn't love, but I enjoyed the writing style, and it's good, but I didn't enjoy it. And it could be that it's not the right book at the right time, or right book, wrong time, whatever you want to call it. But there was a lot of commentary on the characters. There was a lot of commentary on the times. It's set around the turn of the century. My camera stopped, I don't know. So where was I? The book is set in India. It's addressing the fact that the English are still there, are still controlling everything. It's a lot of commentary on colonialism. It's a lot of prejudice on what each different society expects of the other, the thoughts the Indians have of the British prejudices of the Indian people, and all these things. And everything was well portrayed, but it felt a little bit like it was focusing on the flaws of everything and the bad of everything. I don't know if it was just how I read it from today's perspective, or it was really meant like that when the book was written first. I'm not completely sure. And I read about, did I read 50%? I think I read 50%. And then I spark notes the rest. So I read summaries. And I decided that's good to put it aside, because the whole part that came after the parts that I read already sounded to be more tedious and more on miscommunication, misunderstanding, and how these two different people cannot work and live together, and the boundaries or the differences, how hard they would be to overcome, or how nobody wanted to overcome them. And also there was a trial with sexual assault that was going to happen, and I was just not in the mood for that. So I didn't finish, or I didn't DNF the book because I didn't like it. Well, I sort of didn't enjoy it, but I could see what it does. And sometimes with classics, that's what you do. You see why it's a classic, you see what it did and why it's important. But I often find myself not really enjoying reading them. And so in March, I had to decide that self-care is DNFing, because everything else was confusing and weird and strange already. I couldn't put that on myself taking it into April. So I decided at the end of March, I'm going to DNF. The same with The Tale of Genji. I started that. I have 2 audiobooks, volume 1 and volume 2. Together there are 70 hours encompassing the whole of this book. So The Tale of Genji is a classic Japanese novel, or there are discussions if it's a novel or not, if it's the first novel or not, but it was stories that are told about Genji, and he's a fictional character made up by this noble woman for her friends. So there were chapters and chapters, so you could call it a chapter book or a serialized book that's published in different installments, like Dickens books, for example, and Tolstoy. But who knows if that ever happened with the publishing, or if she just passed them on to her friends. Anyways, the story follows this prince who's not the crown prince, but he's a prince, and his life. And I listened to 15 hours about. The book starts off with a chapter on how you should read it, that you shouldn't just listen to it leisurely, but you should critically engage with the text. Then the next chapter is all about giving you some historical background, so you might understand a few things better. And then the story starts. Pretty early on, we learn that Genji is this prince, and that he's been married off at 12 to an older woman for political gain of the father. And not Genji's father, but the woman's father, and how he's never really happy with that. And then he goes on affairs. A lot of what I've listened to was affairs with different women. And we have to remember that by that time he was just 12. I think I stopped when he was 20 and being exiled, because somehow he couldn't keep it secret anymore and was discovered that he was sleeping around the court and everywhere. I don't remember all the names. I don't remember who and when and where, and a lot of it was some was cringy, some was strange. given from today's perspective, maybe not so weird, and the age difference and the cringiness about the grooming of younger people, where we're talking 10-year-olds, might not have been as cringy and creepy in 1100 than it is now, but there was a lot of it where I noticed that they were right. You cannot just leisurely listen to this. You have to engage with the text more. I should have kept a list of all the names and the relationships, the times, and how old he was back then, so you need to really pay attention. What I did notice, or what I enjoyed, was the way of the writing, the way the story was told, the implementation of life, how it was back there for people at the court and the nobles, and how they engaged in poetry, writing a lot to communicate. All of that came across and was beautiful. I could enjoy that. So I decided for the Tale of Genji as well. I've experienced it. I've seen why it is a classic. I've seen what it makes it important in the whole scale of everything in the reading world. But I don't think I want to listen to more of it. I don't think I will ever sit down and read it, because 70 hours, probably over 1,000 pages, and with the engagement that it would need, I'm not that interested in deep diving into books, but this book would definitely serve well for a deep dive if you're interested. So I put that aside as well. And that's giving me a new start for April. I want to achieve quite a few things. If you look at my TBR up there are quite a lot of books. I would love to read some of those. I will have a vacation in April, so I'll have a week off, and I hope to finish at least one big book. But other than that, most of my reading is looking for fast-paced escapism and not too complicated right now. I'm not in the mind space and the space in time and anything going on around that I have the time to really invest into complicated books. Not sure if that really works out, because I think the big book I want to read is also for the Read Good Challenge, or I don't even know what the challenge is called, but it's a Women's Prize winner, and I've decided to read a 500 plus page book by Ruth Ozeki. Smart choices, yes, I'm doing them still. Anyways, March was a good reading month. I enjoyed the time I spent with books. I enjoyed a lot of time that I had in March overall. I enjoyed the blogging. I enjoyed that I traveled for the first time again. I really do think I had achievements, but I just don't know. Things feel off. So let's hope April will be better. I'm interested in your March. Have you read good books? Have you heard or read the books I talked about? What are your plans? How was March for you? Do you have great April plans? Let's talk in comments. Thank you all for watching. Bye bye.